everyone, welcome to this special edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Han.
And I'm Noaram. We're just half an hour away from the new year, and it's the moment where we reflect on the past 12 months and set new goals for the coming year. And tonight we take a look back at the major stories that dominated the news cycle both in Korea and abroad, and what to look out for in 2020.
That's right, Adam. 2019 has truly been an eventful year for South Korea, with ups and downs both on the domestic and on the global front. We've witnessed several historic moments this year, from the Hanoi summit and the DMZ handshake between leaders of North Korea and the U.S., while the nation was also mired in a pile of diplomatic and economic conundrums. We'll break down major turn of events sector by sector in this special edition, so stay with us till the very end.
Yes, but first, as we inch closer to midnight, thousands of people are gathered in central Seoul to celebrate the start of the new year with the traditional bell-ringing ceremony at Bosinggak Pavilion.
Let's connect straight to our Lee Kyung-eun, who is braving the cold with the crowd at the Belfry. Kyung-eun, over to you.
Happy New Year. Well, it's getting really exciting here. The official event has started about an hour ago, and now we're actually heading towards the highlight of tonight's event, which is the actual bell ringing ceremony that will kick off in about 30 minutes. And people are especially excited about tonight's lineup, and it's probably because of the giant penguin character Pengsu. And Pengsu is a YouTube star and one of the most popular characters in South Korea for his crazy sense of humor. And also this year, we have the famous Major League Baseball player Ryu Hyun-jin joining in the ceremony, and it's extra special because he was a surprise last-minute addition to the lineup. And 10 other notable citizens will including the criminal psychologist Lee Soo-jung, who has contributed to solving high-profile crimes in the country, and disability rights lawyer Kim Dong-hyun. And Seoul Mayor Park Won-sun will also attend. And to make sure you do not miss out the iconic moment, there will be countdown right before the midnight, and when the clock hits exactly 12 a.m., that's when the bell will ring 33 times, marking the start of a brand new year. But the official event will continue after the actual bell ringing ceremony. So if you want to come out, it's not too late, so come out, but make sure you bundle up nice and tight because it's freezing out here.
Well, thank you very much, Kyung-eun, for that. Do stay warm out there. It certainly does look very chilly over there. And make sure not to get a cold. We'll check in with you later again tonight before the stroke of midnight. Now, before we usher in 2020, let's take some time to look back at 2019.
Starting off things on a lighter note, we first bring you a wrap-up of some of the biggest sports news that made the headlines this year in South Korea. Arirang's Kan Young-woo has this report.
2019 was a memorable one for Korean sports fans. The nation's two biggest stars shined in their respective professional fields, Son Heung-min in the English Premier League and Ryu Hyun-jin in Major League Baseball. Playing for Tottenham Hotspur, Son set a new record for most goals scored by a South Korean footballer in the European League, surpassing Cha Bum-gun's previous record of 121 goals. Earlier this month, he became the top Asian finisher in the Ballon d'Or voting, an annual award given to the world's best football player. Son came in 22nd place out of 30 nominees. He was also named Tottenham Hotspur's 2019 MVP by CIES Football Observatory. The research group rated Son as the player who had the biggest influence on the team's results. In Major League Baseball, the Korean monster Ryu Hyun-jin has recently signed a 4-year contract worth $80 million with the Toronto Blue Jays, the biggest deal ever for a South Korean pitcher. This came after his monstrous 2018-2019 campaign with the LA Dodgers. Ryu led both the American and National Leagues with an ERA of 2.32. He stands as the only Asian player to achieve that feat. The Korean left-hander earned his first All-Star selection and became the starting pitcher for the National League. Ryu was also the runner-up for the National League's Cy Young Award, an annual honor given to the best pitcher of the regular season. In the process, he became the first Asian to receive a first-place vote. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
2019 was a year full of historic firsts for K-pop and Korean movies. Parasite won a slew of prestigious international awards and is on course to earn even more honors.
And sky was the limit for South Korea's boy band BTS, breaking one record after another. Our cultural correspondent Lee Min-sun has the details.
2019 was a year full of pleasant surprises for fans of Korean movies and pop music. One of the biggest successes in South Korea's cultural space was director Bong Joon-ho and his film Parasite. In May, Parasite became the first South Korean film to win the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and may even become the first South Korean film to win an Oscar or a Golden Globe Award. Parasite has been shortlisted for Best International Feature Film and Best Original Song at the upcoming Academy Awards in February and nominated for 3 honors, Best Foreign Language Film, Best Director, and Best Screenplay at the 77th Annual Golden Globe Awards to be held on January 5th. Despite its local setting and storyline, the universal message in it won the sympathy of international audiences and won it a number of recognitions, setting an important milestone for the South Korean film industry, which marks its 100th anniversary this year. K-pop also made a big impact globally. In April, the South Korean boy band BTS released their mega hit album, Map of the Soul Persona, which topped the Billboard 200 and the UK's official album chart. The music video for Boy With Love set the record for the video, streamed the most times within 24 hours of its release, amassing 74.6 million views. The group has won 3 awards at the American Music Awards for a second year in a row, including the one for Favorite Duo or Group in the pop and rock category, making them the first non-English language singers to win that honor. BTS also successfully completed their first worldwide stadium tour in 13 countries, including the US, England, Japan, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia, drawing millions of fans from around the world. The Love Yourself, Speak Yourself World Stadium Tour was a dream come true moment for BTS as they made their debut at some of the highest profile concert venues, including Citi Field Baseball Park in New York and London's Wembley Stadium. BTS made history by becoming the first South Korean artist to headline at Wembley and also the first ever international band to hold a solo stadium concert in Saudi Arabia. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Turning now to the local economy, it hasn't looked that great this year. The nation is expected to post around 2% expansion this year.
It's lower than previous projections, mainly due to slower trade, investment, and consumption. Arirang's chief economics correspondent Kim Hae-sung gives us an overview of the local economy in 2019.
South Korea is expected to post growth of 2% this year, lower than the government's original outlook last year of between 2.6 and 2.7%, mainly due to sluggish exports, low investment, and slower domestic consumption.
A slower global economy and uncertainties like the US-China trade dispute hurt global trade. South Korea, which is highly dependent on exports, was negatively affected by this trade downturn on top of sluggish investment.
Semiconductor exports accounted for about a fifth of South Korea's total exports in 2018, but with chip prices plunging this year on oversupply and low demand, chip exports fell sharply. Shipments to China, Korea's #1 export partner, fell amid slower Chinese economic growth. Total exports in the last 12 months through November this year came to $545 billion, down 10% on year. Both construction investment and facilities investment dropped by 4% and 8% respectively, which also negatively affected consumer demand, contributing to low inflation. For the first time since records began in 1965, Korea saw consumer prices drop, falling 0.4% in September, triggering fears of deflation. To support growth, the Bank of Korea has cut interest rates to a record low of 1.25%, and the government carried out an expansionary fiscal policy on top of its 3 signature policies of inclusive growth, innovative growth, and building a fair economy.
The government's inclusive growth policy of job creation and welfare policies saw positive outcomes this year. The employment rate hit a record high. We saw more newly added jobs. Income distribution fared better with a lower Gini coefficient, a lower income quintile share ratio, and a lower relative poverty rate.
Still, a key task that remains is to improve the quality of jobs and to create more employment for those in their 40s. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
2019 was full of hurdles for various parts of the world seeking greater democracy and political autonomy.
These include the massive anti-government protests in Hong Kong as well as Brexit. Our Kim Da-mi sheds light on some of the major headlines around the world this year.
The year of 2019 was full of movements to achieve sweeping change. What began over a controversial extradition bill in Hong Kong has now evolved into a broader, fearless movement for greater democratic freedom. After weeks of violent clashes between riot police and demonstrators, the bill that will allow for criminal suspects to be extradited to China was indefinitely scrapped in September. But that didn't stop the protesters' cries for greater democracy. Under the motto 5 demands, not one less, Hong Kong protesters are fighting for 4 other rights, including amnesty for arrested protesters and an independent inquiry into alleged police brutality. Violence has dragged on throughout the island. In the worst instance, an 18-year-old protester was shot in the chest with a live bullet by riot police. According to the Hong Kong daily Mingpao, police have arrested nearly 6,000 people between June and December, and roughly a third of them were students. Tensions are reaching fever pitch with escalating anti-Chinese sentiment, especially among young protesters who are less likely to identify themselves as Chinese. Other defining moments in the movement include the standoff between riot police and protesters at the barricaded campus of Hong Kong's Polytechnic University, the U.S. Congress passing a bill supporting Hong Kong, and last but not least, the local elections held last month. The vote saw a landslide victory for pro-democracy movements, with all 18 councils now controlled by pro-democracy councillors.
It's very likely that the Hong Kong protesters will keep doing what they do until next year when we have the Hong Kong Legislative Council elections. I suspect the Hong Kong protesters will use the same sort of tactics and methodology to try and garner more votes in the lead up to next year's elections.
2019 has also been full of ups and downs for the UK. The country has yet another new Brexit deadline, this time on January 31st, 2020. The British government, formed by the Conservative Party, has introduced a revised version of its withdrawal agreement bill that the UK will no longer be a part of the EU starting on January 31st. That's assuming the European Parliament also gives a green light. Even after its departure, it's not the end of the Brexit story. The UK will enter an 11-month transition period until December 31st next year. The UK's trading relationship with the EU will remain the same following the EU's rules, but this is the period when the UK and the EU will have to work on a free trade deal. But if a trade deal is not ready by the end of next year, that will mean checks and tariffs on British goods entering the EU. In fact, total UK trade last year came to more than 1.7 trillion US dollars, almost half of which was with the EU. So the transition period will be a crucial time for the UK to achieve a free trade deal. Johnson has clarified there will be no formal extension to the transition period. But one thing's for sure, many more negotiations and talks involving the Brexit drama are to be continued. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
2019 started on a positive note with high expectations for a successful North Korea-US summit in February, but the session ended with no breakthrough.
The stalemate has continued with little improvement being made in Pyongyang's relations with Washington. Our Oh Jung-hee recaps on 2019's nuclear negotiations and cross-border ties.
The denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States hit a snag as their second summit in Hanoi in February ended with no agreement. The deal fell apart because North Korea suggested that in exchange for dismantling its Yongbyon nuclear complex, the U.S. should lift 5 out of the 11 sanctions that affect the civilian economy. But the U.S. saw those 5 sanctions as critical and demanded more than Yongbyon. And since then, there's been no progress. There's still a big gap in their views. There was a surprise impromptu rendezvous in late June between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump at the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom, and the working-level delegations of the two sides met in Stockholm in early October, but neither of those really provided a breakthrough in their negotiations. In the meantime, the North has continuously warned that it'll take a new path next year if its talks with the U.S. don't bear fruit by the year's end. And Pyongyang turned its back against South Korea, rejecting Seoul's food aid, citing South Korea-U.S. joint military drills, and telling Seoul to remove its facilities from Mount Kumgang tourist resort. Since the failed working-level talks in October, North Korea has released nearly 20 statements calling on the United States to abide by the year-end deadline. In addition to exchanging tough rhetoric with Washington on possible use of military force, the North ramped up pressure by announcing that it carried out some crucial tests to upgrade missile technologies. But for the past 2 weeks, the North has stayed completely silent. It issued no statements slamming the U.S. What we have to look at now is Kim Jong-un's New Year's address that's coming up on January 1st. 오정희, Arirang News.
Now, staying with North Korea issues, this year also saw bitter rhetoric being exchanged between the North and the US. That war of words was triggered by Pyongyang's numerous weapons tests.
This has sparked concerns that the chances for reviving nuclear talks are looking slim. Our Kim Ji-yeon shares with us an expert's take on North Korea's new path if negotiations fail.
Pundits are divided on the scenarios North Korea may take as a new path if the U.S. doesn't make concessions by the regime's self-imposed year-end deadline. Some say it may entail Kim Jong-un's address to rescind its moratorium on nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missile tests. But others say North Korea would need more justification to launch ICBMs or conduct nuclear tests, which would result in crossing the U.S.'s red line, or Washington's last straw that could rekindle hostile exchanges between Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, as seen in 2017.
The test launch of ICBMs are included in the so-called new path. But North Korea is not expected to initially reveal its advanced weapon first, since it will lose its bargaining chip with the U.S. once it's fired.
The North's media have recently been emphasizing the importance of conducting missions related to space exploration, citing other countries' own projects. This had been prompting speculations that the new path could be the launch of satellite projectiles. There's also the possibility the North may unveil a new submarine from its Shimpo shipyard, a 3,000-ton vessel that can withstand longer than its current 1,000-ton submarine. In response, South Korea is beefing up its defense capabilities closely with the U.S. by acquiring state-of-the-art weaponry, including 40 F-35A stealth fighter jets by 2021 and 4 RQ-4 Global Hawks that are to arrive by early next year at the latest. They're expected to help counter new challenges by the North, as shown through 13 test firings of weapons throughout 2019. That included 4 major types of new weapons, including a submarine-launched ballistic missile from a sea-based platform, the North's version of a weapon that resembles the U.S. Army's surface-to-surface missile system ATACMS, super-large multiple rocket launcher, as well as North Korea's version of Russia's Iskander-class short-range ballistic missile. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, turning to tensions elsewhere, in recent months, tensions between South Korea and Japan reached boiling point, triggered by historical and trade disputes.
Our Kim Mo-kyun zooms in on those historical disputes that have been going on far before 2019.
Relations between Korea and Japan go back to the early 1900s. In 1910, Japan formally annexed the Korean Empire, establishing the Korean Peninsula as its overseas colony. For 35 years, Imperial Japan ruled over the peninsula with nearly absolute power. During the time, Korea saw a rapid urban and industrial growth, but many Korean citizens were abused harshly, often with summary execution, rape, and forced labor. Records show that during World War II, at least 667,000 Korean men were involuntarily sent to Japan to work for local coal and mining factories and construction companies under harsh conditions. Hundreds of thousands of women from various races were forced to serve in Japanese military brothels as a form of sexual slavery. In the past decade, some 500 Koreans revealed their identities as former sex slaves. Of them, only 20 survive today. Japanese rule over Korea ended on August 15, 1945, and 20 years later, Seoul and Tokyo signed the Treaty on Basic Relations to normalize bilateral ties. Though there were ups and downs in between, the two countries have been on relatively amicable terms from then on until relations hit rock bottom in October last year. South Korea's Supreme Court made a series of rulings ordering Japanese companies to compensate each victim around $86,000, claiming that the victim's individual rights to seek compensation are not covered by the bilateral agreement.
The 1965 State-to-State Treaty on Normalizing Relations does not include compensation for rights violated by Japan's illegal occupation.
Japan was strongly opposed to the decision, reiterating that any compensation due to Koreans who suffered wrongs during its occupation was covered by the treaty.
The Japanese government's stance is that the compensation issue between Seoul and Tokyo has been completely and finally resolved through the 1965 treaty.
Since then, relations between the two Asian neighbors have continued to deteriorate to the point where economic and security issues have been affected. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Although those tensions between Seoul and Tokyo did reach a boiling point, efforts have been made to improve South Korea-Japan relations, with certain concessions being made.
And our Kim Min-ji updates us on the situation thus far and whether there is a chance for improving ties.
Hopes were high that the Christmas Eve summit between President Moon Jae-in and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe would provide much-needed momentum for the two sides to patch up their brittle relationship. Despite their differences over history and trade, the two leaders agreed to meet more often and not leave the situation unaddressed.
일본과 한국은 지리적으로 역사적 문화적으로 가장 가까운 이웃이자 그 역사 인적 교류에서도 매우 중요한 평생번영의 동반자입니다. 잠시 불편한 일이 있어도 결코 멀어질 수 없는 사이입니다.
I also hope to develop the important Seoul-Tokyo relationship and exchange honest views.
It was a step in the right direction given that bilateral relations took a sharp turn for the worse this year. Japan stripped South Korea of its preferential treatment and export procedures, on top of imposing tougher restrictions on the export of 3 high-tech materials. Tokyo cited a breach of trust and security issues, but Seoul saw it as retaliation for the compensation issue of Japan's wartime forced labor. South Korea hit back by taking Japan off its own trade whitelist and decided to withdraw from a joint military intel sharing pact known as JSOMIA. But there were efforts along the way to build bridges. South Korea's Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun visited Tokyo to attend the enthronement ceremony of the new Japanese emperor, while Moon and Abe had brief talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN meeting in Bangkok. Such events, coupled with behind-the-scenes diplomacy, bore fruit. 6 hours before JSOMIA was set to expire, South Korea decided to conditionally put off its decision to withdraw, with Japan agreeing to resume talks over their trade dispute. Since then, a round of talks have been held between the two sides, while Tokyo has relaxed export restrictions for one of the 3 materials it had put under tighter control.
It's a positive sign that the two sides have started to talk, but the trade issue will take some time to solve, and to put Seoul back on Tokyo's trade whitelist will require the approval of Japan's cabinet. That said, South Korea will also put JSOMIA back on the table.
But even if progress is made on that front, experts say the key will be whether they can find a fundamental solution to their historical dispute that's acceptable to both governments and the victims. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Right, the time now is 11:54 and 30 seconds here in Korea. We're only just a few minutes away from ringing in 2020. Let's connect back to our Lee Kyung-eun, who is at Boshingak Pavilion, and for more on the atmosphere ahead of the actual ringing ceremony. Kyung-eun, what's the atmosphere like there now? Only just over 5 minutes to go.
Yes, we're inching closer to the highlight of tonight's event, which is the actual bell ringing ceremony that will kick off in about just about a minute or so. And here, some 100,000 people have come here to celebrate the coming of New Year. So it is definitely the epicenter of the New Year celebration. And tonight, people are especially excited about the lineup. We have to talk about the giant penguin character Pengsu. Pengsu is a YouTube star and one of the most popular characters in South Korea for its crazy sense of humor. And also we have the famous Major League Baseball player Ryu Hyun-jin joining in the ceremony, and he was a surprise last-minute addition to the lineup. And there are also going to be 10 other notable citizens, and Seoul Mayor Park Won-sun will also attend. And now there is going to be a countdown right before midnight, and when the clock is exactly at midnight, that's when the bell will ring 33 times, marking the start of the brand new year. So guys, it is really the last few minutes of 2019, and I hope everyone spends it well, and welcome a Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, Kyung-eun, and Happy New Year to you too. And thank you for filling us in on the latest from Boshingak, braving the cold the entire evening. Hope you didn't catch a cold today. Now we're literally just moments away from the new year, the year of the rat, which opens up a new 12-year cycle of animals in the Chinese zodiac. Year 2020 will also mark the beginning of the new decade.
And just to give you more information about the bell ringing ceremony, the bell will be rung 33 times, which also has significant meaning in Buddhism, and the bell ringing tradition actually dates back to the Joseon dynasty. The Boshingak bell was rung 33 times at 4 a.m. back then to signal the end of the night curfew and the start of the new day. It would notify people that the gates around Seoul, namely the main 4 gates and 4 smaller gates, would open and close. The bell is now rung in modern day times only on special occasions, including Foundation Day, Liberation Day, and New Year's Day.
Right, every year the bell ringing ceremony invites some famous faces to join Seoul city officials. This year we can see we are expecting South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin to take part as well. He's had a very good year with the LA Dodgers and will be sure to make new strides in his new club, the Toronto Blue Jays. And of course, as our Lee Kyung-eun just mentioned in her reporting, the giant penguin character Pengsu will also appear for the traditional ceremony. Now we can see hundreds, if not thousands of people gathered at the Boshingak Pavilion in central Seoul to witness the ringing of the Boshingak bell firsthand, to witness the traditional bell ringing ceremony firsthand.
And there we can see a glimpse of the mega hit star or character that is Pengsu. The
giant penguin
the
character.
Giant penguin is hard to miss.
My daughter is a huge fan of Pengsu, by the way.
Yeah, and he's not just beloved by young people as well. He's also quite popular amongst adults as well, because he has a few jokes up his sleeve that relates to the older generation. There we can't see their faces, but I presume they are some Seoul City officials. We can see Park Won-sun, Seoul City Mayor, there as well, along with Michael Reiterer, the EU's ambassador to South Korea. We can just see the back of his head, unfortunately, at the moment. He's just turned to his left now. In the middle, we can see the giant object that is going to be used to ring the bell to usher in the year 2020, which happens to be the year of the rat, and out of the rat, a special white rat. It's the year of the white rat, which comes every 60 years, and 2019 saw the year of the golden pig as well, which was also a rare occasion. So this year, according to the Chinese calendar, another special year will be marked then. Now, we only have, counting down, only 30 seconds left, and I believe the countdown will start from 15 seconds to midnight, and we will witness the ringing of the Boshingak at the Boshingak Belfry in central Seoul in Chongno. So we'll just keep our eyes on that. I think they're gearing up. the crowd.
And before the countdown begins, as you've mentioned, Aram, a white rat was regarded as a symbol of luck for its rarity and uniqueness. And I believe the countdown has now begun.
And there it is, the bell to welcome 2020, the year of the rat, has been rung. As we said, it will be rung a total of 33 times. A team effort is being made there. I must say, Pengsu certainly does stand out among the crowd there. And then, yeah.
And the number 33, just for our viewers who have just joined us, the number 33 has special meaning in Buddhism, and the bell ringing tradition dates back to the Joseon dynasty. It's a very unique tradition of South Korea. The Pushingak bell was rung 33 times at 4 a.m. to signal the end of the night curfew and start of the new day. So it would notify people that the gates around Seoul were being opened and closed.
Right, and as I mentioned before, now it is only reserved for days like today, the ushering of the new year, as well as Foundation Day and Liberation Day. And every year the bell ringing ceremony, as we can see there, invites some notable figures, and among them, at the front is Seoul City Mayor Park Won-soon. In the dark green is the EU's ambassador to South Korea, Michael Reuterer, and also forensic psychologist Lee Soo-jung is among them. South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin also among that crowd as well. He's had a really good season with the LA Dodgers, but unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but he's pursuing other endeavors at the Toronto Blue Jays in Canada, and we wish him the best over there as well. And it's certainly been a good year for Korean sports athletes based overseas as well.
Year 2020 happens to be the year of the rat, and specifically the white rat, which comes every 60 years. The animal legend signifies wealth and intelligence. And those who are familiar with the legend will know that the rat was the winner of the so-called Great Race. So 2020 is not only the start of a new decade, but also opens up a new 12-year cycle of animals in the Chinese zodiac.
And as we can see, there has been an exchange of people. There is on a rotational basis, and we can see other famous faces and Seoul City officials taking turns to ring the bell. Only, I think, about 10 or I think we're halfway through the bell ringing ceremony. As we mentioned before, it is being rung a total of 33 times, a number that is holds significant meaning in Buddhism as well as in Korean history as well. Now, coming back to the year of the rat, according to ancient Asian history, a white rat, which is the year 2020, was regarded as the symbol of luck for its rarity and uniqueness. And we certainly do hope, everyone here at Arirang do hope all of our viewers for the new year are filled with good luck, joy and happiness, as well as a healthy and wealthy new year. And as a news anchor who witnessed daily developments in Korea and abroad, I do truly hope that Korea and the world can paint a brighter picture politically and economically.
Right, the year has been filled with unprecedented events, but it was also full of difficulties and challenges for South Korea. So let's hope things will take a better turn as we ring in the new year. Now, Adam, what was the most memorable moment for you during 2019? For me personally, it was the historic handshake between Kim Jong-un and President Trump.
Yeah, that certainly was a momentous occasion for the year, an historic occasion. And for me, personally, it was more on the cultural front, actually. I mean, Korean films have also proved to be very successful this year, namely director Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. I mean, a lot of Korean films in the past have gained worldwide popularity and have been on the global stage, but I don't think I've seen anything on this scale when it came to Parasite. I mean, it's just award after award, not to mention the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or.
And now it's eyeing for the Oscars. which is also unprecedented for a South Korean film.
Now, another rotation is being held now. The third team of people to continue ringing the Ushering bell at the Ushering Belfry, and we are in the third stage of the ringing ceremony. And as is customary in Korea, the New Year is often an occasion where the traditional Korean attire of hanbok is worn as well, which we can see there on your television screens. And yeah, back to your question. Yeah, Parasite was an especially memorable film for me. I saw it and I did think it was well deserved of all the praise that it did get and all the global awards. I've lost count of how many it's won now. And we've just heard that it is the 27th and now the 28th ring is coming, so we are nearly at the end of the 33 rings of the Ushering bell.
Now, I must add, Mr. Darcy Packett, the interpreter who interpreted translated the movie Parasite, came into Arirang studio for our news in-depth.
Yes, he did.
So
yeah.
An interview with him was definitely memorable. And boy band BTS, we can't leave out our BTS.
Certainly not, no.
Also made it big on the global stage. Let's hope the K-pop sensation success will also continue into the year 2020. Just 3 more rings to go now. Quite a long but meaningful and unique tradition of ushering in the new year in South Korea.
I've always wondered, that must be quite a workout in itself. I mean, the object does look very heavy. I think this is the last ring to usher in the new year of 2020.
I can't believe it's already a new decade.
Sorry, corrections, it was the penultimate ring, and I think now will be the last ring to usher in the new year.
Usher in the new year, the year 2020, as well as ushering in the new decade. I cannot believe how fast time flies.
It certainly has flown by this year.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year.
The year 2020 has finally arrived. So it's that time of the year when people share well wishes for the new year with their loved ones. And if there's one common wish that is deeply embedded in the hearts of Koreans, it would undoubtedly be the peaceful unification of the two Koreas.
Let's now take some time to take a look at the prospects for the denuclearization talks and regional affairs surrounding the Korean Peninsula in 2020 with Dr. Bong Young-sik, professor at Yonsei University's Institute for North Korean Studies. Dr. Bong, welcome to the program and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank you. Now, as the world geared up to welcome the new year, North Korea continued with its ruling party meeting for a 4th day. It's quite rare for that to happen for multiple days, with the Central Committee holding the party meeting that long. What does this imply?
Well, you're absolutely correct that it is very rare that the General Assembly meeting lasted more than 2 days. The statement issued by the media-sponsored news agency of North Korea assured that there will be another meeting. So there is a chance that the delivery of New Year's message by Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un may miss the actual New Year's Day. And it is only the second time since early 1990s that the meeting lasted more than 2 days. And this time it gathered about 900 members of the Korean Workers' Party, as opposed to average 200 members of the core high-ranked officials of the party in the previous meetings. That shows how significant this time the meeting is, which is once again the second time that the party assembled this meeting, not just once a year.
Now, the world is closely watching what kind of message Kim Jong-un would send through his New Year's address. And judging from the outcome of the Workers' Party's Central Committee meeting so far, what's expected from his New Year's message?
Well, Kim Jong-un in the last meeting, which took place in April last year, promised that if there's no corresponding measures or meaningful gestures coming from Washington by the Trump administration, North Korea would be compelled to seek so-called a new way. Many experts and the watchers of the Korean Peninsula would interpret that North Korea may come back to provocations in the form of the resumption of the ICBM test, intercontinental ballistic missile, that can hit the United States, or resumption of nuclear test. But I don't think Kim Jong-un is really 100% set to cross the red line set by Washington, resumption of those major provocations. So I guess that's the reason why the Kim Jong-un government is taking so much time with the not only the Central Military Committee meeting prior to the general meeting of the Korean Workers' Party, which has not ended yet. So I think he is still in deliberation to decide the actual content of the New Year's message and the actual definition of the new way to be announced to the world.
Right. And speaking of Kim Jong-un's New Year's message, that would of course have an effect on Washington's policy on North Korea for next year. Do you expect any changes, if any, in US policy for North Korea?
I don't think so, and that's a bad news for Pyongyang. I don't think there's any indication by President Trump, who calls the shots when it comes to actual implementation of North Korea policy, to deviate from the default North Korea policy, dubbed as maximum pressure, maximum engagement. If you listen to the wordings and Twitter messages sent by President Trump, nothing major change has taken place. I mean, he said that if North Korea gives up nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, then North Korea can be next China, Vietnam, or South Korea. So it is up to North Korean leadership to decide what to do about missiles and nuclear warheads. And North Korea counters with the argument, the same old argument that unless the United States stops the hostile policy since the time of the Korean War, there is no way for North Korea to give up nuclear weapons and missiles because it's a matter of survival and national security. So neither side has budged from the original arguments.
Now, China's role in denuclearizing North Korea is once again gaining the spotlight following its request to the UN to ease North Korea's sanctions. Would Beijing become a major player next year in denuclearization efforts?
I don't think so, because if you look carefully, the content of the draft resolution submitted both by Russia and China as two permanent members of United Nations Security Council about partial easing of existing United Nations Security Council resolutions on North Korea, like easing the restriction on the North Korea's export of fishery products, some joint ventures between the two Koreas, as well as the employment of the North Korean workers overseas. I don't think China and Russia were serious enough to believe that the United Nations Security Council members would pass that resolution for North Korea, but it is more about saving its face and trying to send the message to Pyongyang that Russia and China had done more than their own parts to persuade the rest of the world, but it failed. So I don't think China can actually replace the United States in the negotiation between Pyongyang and Washington to do something about meaningful and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and building sustainable peace regime on the Korean Peninsula since the Korean War.
Right, and we did witness historic moments in 2019 from various summits held at third nations. What efforts do you think the two Koreas and the US should hold?
Well, we have to watch what North Korea is going to do. I don't think Kim Jong-un has recovered from the shock of no agreement, the breakdown of the Hanoi summit meeting. Now, it seems like a distant memory, but it took place about 10 months ago. And it is very, I would say, strange for Kim Jong-un regime not to come up with an alternative plan, plan B or C, after the breakdown of Hanoi summit meeting in February. it mainly engaging in very harsh and raw criticisms of the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea, and just maintained the same position with the ultimatum that Washington had to move first. But the Trump administration believed that the sanctions have been working. And actually, the terms of the bilateral trade between North Korea and China has not been improved. It only got worse. So it seems like North Korea is going to suffer from another huge trade deficit vis-a-vis China in the year of 2019. In the year 2017, North Korea economy actually shrank by 3.5%, and it recorded a trade deficit with China with 1.6 billion US dollars. And last year, it looks like North Korea is going to suffer another huge trade deficit with China with about 1.9 billion US dollars. Then the economic situations in North Korea are getting worse. Then you cannot say that North Korea's straight leverage upon the Trump administration of the United States have been strengthened.
All right, that's all the time we have for you. Thank you, Dr. Bong, as always, for your perspectives, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you again.
2019 was my beginning of my career, and I'd like to increase my potential in next year and start more business of my freelancing business.
저는 2019년에 고2로서 공부랑 이제 학교 생활하느라 좀 힘들었는데 2020년도에는 대학교도 가야 하고 졸업도 해야 되니까 조금 더 보람찬 생활을 살게 됐으면 좋겠어요.
저는 2019년에 새로 작가라는 장래희망을 갖게 돼가지고 새로 예체능 공부를 하게 됐는데 고3 때는 그 결실을 맺을 수 있으면 좋겠습니다.
올해 아무래도 경기가 어려우니까 일하는데 여러 가지 힘들었는데 그래도 뭐 올해는 뭐 아들 같은 경우는 새로 군대 가서 잘 적응하고 있고 뭐 둘째 딸 같은 경우는 또 대학도 잘 좋은 원하는 데를 가서 나름대로 좀 만족스러운 한 해였던 것 같습니다.
2019년에 취업 준비하면서 제 자신이 또 어떤 사람인지 좀 돌아보면서 좀 힘들기도 했지만 그래도 제 자신을 알게 돼서 되게 값진 시간들이었고 내년에는 좀 더 좀 활기차고 밝은 날들이 많았으면 좋겠다 생각합니다.
정치가 안정됐으면 좋겠어요. 첫째 그게 저는 소망이고요. 외식도 줄이고 근데 외식을 많이 해야 경제는 돌아가잖아요. 근데 지금 이제 세금 문제 이런 게 많으니까 그런 게 자꾸 줄어들어요. 그게 조금 안타깝긴 하죠.
돼지들처럼 욕심이 많았던 해인 것 같습니다. 내년에 경자년에는 다산을 상징하는 주의 해니까는 생산성이 많은 그런 일들이 발생했으면 좋겠습니다. 다산 풍요로운 한 해가 되길 바라겠습니다. 감사합니다.
The global economy is expected to improve slightly in 2020 thanks to fewer uncertainties and faster growth posted by emerging economies.
For an economic outlook of South Korea's economy for 2020, here's our business correspondent Kim Hye-sung.
The South Korean government expects the local economy next year to post growth of 2.4%, up from this year's 2%. Other economic research institutes and banks forecast a range of between 1.7 and 2.3%, with an increase in exports and facilities investment. The IMF forecasts global growth next year to go up 0.4 percentage points to 3.4% thanks to a recovery in emerging economies.
Growth is expected to rise in most emerging markets other than China starting next year, though the pace of recovery will be limited.
South Korea's exports are expected to rebound on a base effect and faster global trade, which the WTO expects to double to near 3% growth. In particular, semiconductor exports are expected to go up on demand from global data centers and 5G-related technologies, providing a boost for Korean tech giants like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. The auto sector, which accounts for about a tenth of Korea's manufacturing jobs, will remain sluggish on weak global demand and ongoing restructuring efforts.
Overall, the outlook for chips, shipbuilding, and secondary batteries looks positive, while others are expected to recover slightly or decline. Demand for secondary batteries is expected to continue increasing on IT sector demand, including driverless cars. As for steel, petrochemical, and displays, they'll face even fiercer competition from China, resulting in sluggish exports.
On top of continuing with its expansionary fiscal policy, Seoul's finance ministry has vowed to invest a total of $86 billion in public and private investment and announced a series of policies, including a consumption tax cut for some car buyers to help boost domestic consumption. While the domestic and global economic outlooks for 2020 are expected to be better than 2019, the U.S.-China trade tensions and Brexit remain as downside risks. To tackle the three lows facing the country, namely lower interest rates, lower prices, and lower potential economic growth, the keys for the Korean economy in 2020 will be to increase investment and nurture new industries by easing government regulations to lift consumer sentiment and to diversify trade as a way to hedge uncertainties and support growth. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Major events are also lined up across the world, from the 2020 U.S. presidential election and Brexit to the ongoing turmoil in Hong Kong, as well as global action on climate change.
Our Yoon Jung-min reports on what to look out for next year in terms of geopolitical affairs.
One issue will undoubtedly dominate the headlines in the U.S. this year, the 2020 presidential election. President Trump, who's seeking re-election in November, will hold his first campaign rally of the new year in Ohio on January 9th. President Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives in December, but the House has been holding off on sending the articles of impeachment to the Republican-controlled Senate, claiming it would be an unfair trial. Even before the House voted, numerous senior Republicans said Trump's impeachment would be dead on arrival in the Senate.
So I think this exercise in the House is beginning to weaponize impeachment. When it gets here, my goal is to have as short a trial as possible.
While some say the impeachment will damage Trump's reputation, others argue it will have little impact or might even strengthen President Trump's re-election chances, as the articles won't pass the Senate. On the Democratic side, the frontrunners are former Vice President Joe Biden, Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. In a recent poll by Reuters conducted between December 18th and 19th, Biden, Sanders, and Warren were the top three aiming to topple Trump in November. Democrats will hold their first caucus in Iowa on February 3rd. In the UK, Brexit is set to happen by the January 31st deadline, led by Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party, which now holds a solid majority in the House of Commons following the recent snap election. From this year, Johnson aims to build a new relationship between Britain and the European Union.
And it paves the way for a new agreement on our future relationship with our European neighbours based on an ambitious free trade agreement, with no alignment, with no alignment on EU rules, but instead control of our own laws.
Even if the UK leaves the bloc this month, there wouldn't be a dramatic change right away because the UK and Brussels will go through a transition period until the end of 2020. Throughout the year, they will be negotiating a comprehensive trade deal. However, many experts say it will be very challenging to meet the tight timetable. In Hong Kong, demonstrators say they won't stop their protests until Chief Executive Carrie Lam accepts all of their 5 demands, including free and democratic elections. What's waiting for Hong Kong this year is a legislative election in September, which is likely to be affected by the protests if the situation doesn't improve. Eyes are on whether China will actively intervene, as Beijing has been pushing Hong Kong to enact national security law to crack down on the protesters. In November, world leaders will gather at the COP26 in Glasgow in a bid to narrow the gap on tackling climate change. At last year's UN climate talks, countries couldn't agree on details of how they're going to cut carbon emissions. In June, the P4G summit will be held in Seoul, where global leaders and climate activists will gather to discuss green growth. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Much attention is also being paid to what new technologies will emerge in 2020, especially in the quick-moving society of Korea.
Our Ushering breaks down what lies in store to meet Korea's new digital and consumption needs.
2020 is expected to be a year of hyper-personalization as Koreans become more and more individualistic and adopt smart technologies in their daily lives. As Generation Z, who were born between the mid-90s and early 2000s, become economically active, more and more products and services will be catered to their needs for instant satisfaction. These include super-fast delivery around the clock and smart mobility options such as electric scooters. Streaming services for video and online games are also expected to become faster and more diverse, fueled by the country's super-fast 5G network. And given the nature of the younger generation who prioritize individuality, all products and solutions, ranging from skincare to online entertainment, are likely to offer more customized options through hyper-personalization, which is gathering real-time data of customers to tailor product services and experiences. Helping enable this personal bubble are connected technologies such as AI speakers and smart home devices.
In 2019, we saw a huge increase in the number of households acquiring smart speakers. In 2020, this trend will continue and we'll see more personalized services based on AI speakers and other smart devices, such as smartwatches from healthcare and personal banking to mobility solutions.
Also, a growing number of Koreans are expected to lead socially conscious lifestyles in 2020, from consuming vegan food and upcycled products to supporting ethical causes.
Generation Z values social justice. Thus, they'll require transparency between all channels of business and ethical values and processes such as environmental protection, the support of women's rights, and social equality. They want to understand the value they're going to receive when spending money on products and services.
Entering a brand new decade, the characteristics of Generation Z are expected to set major trends for Korean society. Ushering, Arirang News.
South Korea's culture has made major achievements in 2019, especially with some K-pop artists and Korean movies earning global praise.
Our Lee Min-sun looks at what to expect for the potential growth of K-culture in the new year.
Two of the most outstanding achievements that emerged from South Korea's cultural space in 2019 came from K-pop group BTS and Bong Joon-ho's latest movie, Parasite. And their success is likely to continue into the new year. Parasite has been picking up award after award from international film festivals and film critics, adding to expectations it could become the first South Korean film to win an Oscar, Golden Globe, or both. As it's the first time a South Korean film has been nominated for the Golden Globes, winning would be an important milestone for the South Korean film industry and expand its presence within the global film scene.
Previously, only some artistic films from South Korea were recognized globally, but Parasite was also commercially successful. That will change how South Korea is perceived in the global market as a country that can produce films with good content and marketability.
And K-pop, which has long led the Korean wave, is also expected to win over even more international fans in the new year. K-pop's biggest star BTS, who smashed numerous records with their album Map of the Soul Persona, is gearing up to release a new album. The group's leader RM said at a recent music awards ceremony that the band is working on new music and hoped their ARMY fans would be excited to discover what BTS has in store in 2020. The group's agency has also hinted at another world tour starting in April 2020.
BTS are a creative K-pop group, and 2020 will be a time for them to take on new challenges in other areas and create contents for different platforms like movies, dramas, cartoons, and games based on BTS.
Experts also point at possibility of K-pop becoming a major genre in the global market. K-pop is growing fast in Latin America and Southeast Asia, where the total population is more than the population of the major traditional pop music markets. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Well, that wraps up our special live newscast, ushering in the new year. 2019 was certainly an eventful year filled with diplomatic and economic hurdles for South Korea, but hopefully we can hear some good news in the new year.
And we also hope 2020 will be a healthy and wealthy year for all of our viewers across the globe. From all of us here at Arirang, we wish you a very happy new year and thank you as always for being with us. Don't forget to tune in every day to Arirang for your daily dose of Korean and global news updates in 2020.